Okay, happy Thursday, everybody. Glenn Stein, broker, realty executives in the villages, and I have a special guest. And my guest today is Elizabeth Stakenborg. And you have actually, it's kind of interesting because you have been one of our realtors for how long has it been?
Since May.
Since May.
Yeah, so a few months.
So what, six, 7 months
Yep.
now?
Yes.
But
You've got
a prior, yeah, like everybody has a prior life, right? Like everybody has like a bunch of lives. So Liz, tell us what kind of law you practice, because this is going to be really fascinating.
Oh, well, and
Yeah.
thanks
Yeah.
for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I went to University of Florida Law School,
Right.
graduated in 1994. At the time we were living in Ocala, and I became involved in a practice that concentrated in the areas. I initially started off in workers' compensation. So I was helping people who were injured at work and needed benefits.
Wait a second. How do you get started with like workers' comp? I mean, is that you came out like, I want to do workers' comp? How does that?
Not necessarily. I interviewed with several different practices in Ocala, and I ended up working with my partner was Dorothy Sims, and she's been in she's very well known in the Ocala area and actually throughout the country. So she was my mentor as I was coming up in the law practice. So, and that was where they focused there at the time, that the firm focused in the area of workers' compensation litigation.
So it's kind of a natural transition then.
Right
into it. Okay.
Yes.
All right, nice.
And then that also kind of dovetailed because you're dealing with people who've been injured or sick. And many times people can go back to work, but there are the occasional people who, because of an illness or an injury at work, and have been on workers' comp and then are unable to return back to work. And in those circumstances, many times they would have to apply for Social Security disability. So a natural progression for our law practice expanded into the Social Security disability practice. So we would also help our claimants apply for Social Security disability benefits and litigate and work for them in that area too. And that eventually became my sole focus for the last 10 years of my practice.
Got it. Did you find yourself that you were a little bit more interested in the Social Security aspect of things?
The Social Security aspect of things is interesting, and they're different because the people who are applying for Social Security disability are not intending to go back to work at any time, whereas workers' compensation, I mean, the goal really is to get people back to work.
Okay.
So yeah, our focus it's a very fulfilling practice when you're able to obtain the benefits for the clients, because it is the type of practice that takes 2 years and more from the time that somebody applies for benefits. It can be quite sad. People, often are living from paycheck to paycheck, and when that money stops, it can be quite devastating. So, it's a very fulfilling practice to be in, I would say. Yes, gratifying, and people are so grateful.
How do you keep from? Obviously, you're seeing some hard cases. How do you keep from not going too far? Like you almost want to give them money,
Yeah. Well, obviously we're limited. We're not really allowed to do that, but I mean, and we have. I mean, we do here too. We'll do families at Realty Executives. They've sponsored families, and maybe give them gift certificates for Thanksgiving or Christmas, those kinds of things. And our practice did do those kinds of things, the kind of more of a charitable contributions and stuff. But it is very difficult not to get emotionally attached to people that you've been working with for, years at a time, and just seeing them go through just horrible circumstances and sometimes losing homes, that sort of thing. It's very devastating.
Tough. I should have known. Like you're very instrumental behind the scenes. You're not running stuff on the volunteer side, but you've been involved in every single thing that we've had. So I should have put two and two together, in some way.
Try. I mean, it's good to be involved. That's for sure. Yes.
Nice.
It's a great place to be involved with too.
Thank you. We work with a lot. Obviously, our demographic is the senior population. What are some of the things that you've learned over the years in what you've practiced, how can you help people that are, in our demographic, the older population, the retired population? How does that fit in, by the way?
As far as helping them in the area of Social Security, or just
yeah.
So it's a little bit different because people, and it is a different demographic here, of course, because there are a lot of people who are eligible for Social Security, and not disability, just their regular benefits once you reach retirement age. It's generally just a question of going in and making the application. Some people do end up applying early. Some people, delay the benefits so that they can get a higher monthly check. And I think that's all kind of a basically just what you need, or what the circumstances are, whether you apply early or wait. But the people who are applying and getting Social Security benefits are people who've paid into the system. So they worked, you've had to have a certain number of quarters of work to be eligible. If you are eligible for benefits, you will also be eligible for Medicare, which is really important for people to have. I think people get very excited when they're able to get their Medicare benefits, because it's I think, as everybody knows, health insurance is quite expensive. So it's different in the fact that the people who are applying now for Social Security, as long as they have the entitlement to the benefits and have worked that, it's just a question of getting the claim processed, and then it gets paid out.
How's that determined, that eligibility? Denied. How's that sorted out?
It's based on your quarters of work. So there's a certain number of quarters that you have to put in, and 20, for instance, for disability, it's 20 out of the last 40. So basically 5 out of the last 10 years. So as long as you have the number of prerequisite quarters, even if you haven't worked in a long time, you're still going to be eligible for benefits. And some people who haven't worked may be eligible under a spouse's benefits as well. So they would have to be eligible first, and then you can get dependent benefits, they'll call it, or spousal benefits. And when the working person retires or is eligible for Social Security retirement, then the spouse is often eligible as well.
So let's say somebody has some kind of claim in their work life. Does that affect their retirement in any way? In general, a worker's, like for instance, a worker's compensation claim. If you had a work injury and you were out of work for a period of time and you were compensated by the insurance company, it's generally not going to affect your Social Security retirement benefits. However, it can affect if you file for Social Security disability benefits. You can't receive a combination of benefits from workers' compensation and Social Security disability that would be more than 80% of your pre-injury wages. So it's based on a formula, and Social Security in the state of Florida gets to take the offset. So if workers' comp is paying out, then Social Security gets to reduce those benefits until the workers' compensation benefits would stop. Got it.
Yeah. And then there are still some offsets, but that's kind of, it's kind of a case-by-case basis, but it's figured out on what the person was making, the average weekly wage before at the time.
So there's some complicated configurations.
So there are some formulas and things that you have to know.
There's too much math involved.
There is math. Yes. But for retirement, it doesn't affect it, as long as lots of times people settle out a claim, and then it shouldn't affect it in the long run, unless it was over a certain amount of money. Social Security may take an offset.
Did you run into a lot of people that should have been retirement age, but they were still working, and they got into an injury, and you got involved with their case? Is that something you saw a lot of, or was that not?
Not that much, but periodically you would get somebody who was over a certain age. Still, if you're injured at work, you're still going to be compensated by workers' compensation based on what your earnings were. Right. It can get a little more complicated, because some people are working and they're actually receiving Social Security retirement at the same time.
Yes.
If it's retirement and you have a work injury, it shouldn't be affected, because they're two separate claims. So you're not double dipping there. You were already entitled to your Social Security retirement at the time at the time you were injured, and so anything on top of that
It's
is
just part.
where it becomes offsetting, as if it's a compensation for a disability. So,
Okay.
and then workers' compensation is also compensating for the same disability. That's when it gets to be a little more complicated, and there's offsets involved as far as who pays, and and even Medicare can be involved as well. So if you're hurt at work and you have a back injury that really hasn't gotten better, and you're going to require treatment in the future, sometimes Medicare will require that you set aside a certain amount of money for future medical benefits, and that has to stay in a certain bank account called a Medicare set-aside account, and you have to spend that money on your work injury because you were compensated for that work injury, and it shouldn't be Medicare's responsibility. And that's
So I'm sure that happens a lot. Like, you have a particular case, somebody gets hurt, maybe they're 48 years old, and then you see people that lingering effects.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
Unfortunately, we're not in a society, we haven't gotten to that point where you're healed and no more pain and all that. 15, 20, 30, 40 years later, people have lingering effects. How does all this play? Is that kind of what you're talking about with Medicare?
Yeah, it's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And there's a certain threshold for if somebody were to settle out their claim, because this would only happen, there would be an offset only if there's a settlement. If there's no settlement, work comp would continue to pay for that work injury.
Okay.
Supposedly.
Right.
And then not always, but you're supposed to. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a job at the time.
That's right.
So there's a threshold for a settlement, and it does change periodically. But if a workers' compensation claim is settled for over a certain amount, then Medicare is going to want the attorneys to submit that settlement proposal, make sure that Medicare has been considered adequately and that there's enough money in that Medicare account. So it has to be approved if it's over a certain amount of settlement. It has to be approved by Medicare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does the public need to know?
As far as,
what's something that you can share that the public and or anybody that owns a business, that type of thing? What are some things that you can share?
Well, I would say as far as Social Security, I think if you're at retirement age, it's usually a pretty straightforward process. You're either going to apply and you're going to have enough, like I said, enough of the prerequisite quarters to be eligible. Occasionally there's an issue with certain work wasn't properly considered, and you might have to, argue that. I never got involved with that because I was only working on the injury side of it, not the retirement side.
Yes.
So, and Social Security is usually pretty good about answering questions like, is it better for me to take my money early, or is it better to take it later? But they do have their algorithms and their formulas. So it basically works out about the same. You may get a little bit less monthly payment, but you're getting, extra years worth of payments. So it's supposed to work out to the average life expectancy. So it's, that's the way it's supposed to work. As far as for disability, I guess my recommendation is if you have been injured or you are sick, and people always, in general, people do want to try to return to work. It's not like people want to be disabled. But often it's better to go ahead and start the claims process earlier rather than later, because like I said, especially for Social Security, it can take a couple of years before you get to the end of your claim, especially if you have to go before a judge. And
what's the statute for that? What's the limitations on that?
The statute.
So to file a claim, that type of thing.
They don't. Well, that's the funny thing. The claim, you have to be disabled within a certain period of time before your benefits expire. So it's a little bit complicated, but if you've been working and you become disabled, you have a period of time after that where you remain insured. So that your coverage continues because you've paid in. But there is a period after that, if you haven't applied and been found disabled within the time period, your benefits, your entitlement to disability could expire. Now you'd still be entitled to retirement benefits in the future, but there is a time period, and it's based on, again, on the number of credits. So it's kind of a case by case basis. Often it's about 5 years after the time that you stopped working. If you have a pretty steady work history, you stop, and usually about 5 years that you have to prove that you were disabled. And you can get back benefits, but the back benefits only go back a year. So that's why I suggest, if you even if you're not sure you're going to be disabled, you might as well go ahead and start the application process. And if you go back to work, great.
How does somebody do that? Like you're in that boat, or somebody that's in that boat.
It's really an application at the social. You can do it online. They've made it where you can do it. Right. My recommendation probably is talk to an attorney first, just to make sure that you're that you know what's going to be needed. There's a lot of things you need to have. You have to have all your doctor's names. You have to have the medical conditions that you're applying for, and there's quite a bit of just basic information most people would have, but sometimes it's good to have somebody kind of helping you with that. And then you file the claim. Unfortunately, about 90% of first-time claims get denied, and of that.
Why is that?
It's just we always ask that, but Social Security, they get processed and they get denied, and it could just be that they didn't think there was enough there, that maybe there wasn't enough evidence, maybe enough medical evidence hadn't been submitted, and a lot of people are doing it on their own, so they're not submitting everything.
So not having an attorney probably bit them in the butt.
A little bit, yeah. And then so there's another appeal process, which eventually will result in a hearing, and that's where more of the claims would get approved than sometimes these initial applications, unless it's a very, very clear case. And there's certain cases that are automatically approved, based on the medical condition. It's usually a medical condition in that case.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And how, for most people that are coming in, I guess it's done on a percentage, whatever's received.
Yes.
How does it, right?
Yeah. Like for an attorney who's representing a claimant in a Social Security disability process, it is a percentage. It's and it's capped out at I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it was like 6,000.
Right.
It could be a little bit higher now.
Right, but there's a limit.
Yeah, there's a
some
limit.
Kind of cap. Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That makes sense. What else? What can you add? Anything else?
I don't know. That's covered quite a bit of it, I would think. Yeah.
That's awesome. So look, I'm excited because number one, you're with us.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Number two, I'm excited about all the things that are going to be happening in 2020 and all the events we're going to be having, which we'll be talking about.
Yeah, it looks interesting.
Yeah, well,
exciting.
It's going to be fun. So excellent, Liz. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.